Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who I didn't meet this morning, I'm Julia Hannigsberg. I'm the President and CEO of Holland Bloorview, and welcome back for the afternoon. For those of you who are in the atrium for Lazy Legs, wow. Yes, some of us are still recovering and blood pressure is coming down. Amazing, and so amazing to have a client in the audience with his same rare diagnosis. I have a feeling there was a memory made that will be for a lifetime today. So very, very excited that Holland Bloorview could be a part of that. It is my tremendous pleasure. Oh, I have a piece of business to do before I do the introduction. Please, if you have any videos or photos that you took of Lazy Legs, we'd ask that you delete them. We have, I think, some obligations with him to not capture on video his performance. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great. So on to the next part of our afternoon, and I couldn't be more delighted to introduce to you a very special guest, but someone who knows Holland Bloorview very well, who is a familiar figure and a tremendous supporter of the work that we all do collectively, and that is the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, the Honourable Christine Elliott. Minister Elliott was elected as a member of Provincial Parliament for Newmarket Aurora in June of this year, and in addition to being our Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, she is the Deputy Premier for the province of Ontario. Prior to this role, many of you will know that Minister Elliott was Ontario's patient ombudsman, partnering with both patients and healthcare organizations to champion fairness and bring forward the voices of patients to inspire positive change in our healthcare system. Minister Elliott was also a member of Provincial Parliament from 2006 to 2015, during which time her roles included Deputy Leader of the Official Opposition, Critic for the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, Citizenship and Immigration, and Mental Health Reform. Minister Elliott has a long-standing commitment to improve health care, in particular for children and youth with disabilities. She's a co-founder of the Abilities Centre in Whitby, an internationally renowned, innovative community hub where people of all ages and abilities enrich their lives by engaging in social, health, and cultural programs. She's also past director and chair of Grandview Children's Treatment Centre. We are absolutely delighted to have Minister Elliott back with us at Holland Bloorview, and I'd ask you all to welcome her warmly.
Thank you very much, Julia, for your very kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I can only echo the wow with Lazy Legs. Wow. I wish I could do some of that, but I got tired out just doing the warm-up exercises more than I usually get, certainly at Queen's Park. But, I know your topic for discussion is no boundaries, but really it's also no excuses. No limits. It really is. And the message I found so inspiring from him is that find your passion and follow it and do it your way. You don't have to do it the way everybody else does it. Do it your way, and it's going to be wonderful. So I found it very inspiring, and I was really very, very fortunate to be able to see it, even though I had the odd heart palpitation as well at one point when he was jumping over people, but he did it, and it's all good. But I am really honored to be here today in my new capacity as Ontario's Deputy Premier and Minister of Health and Long-Term Care. And I'd really like to thank all of you for the great work that you're doing with children and youth across the province. And I know that your dedication to your research is already having a really huge impact on them. But the Bloorview Research Institute Symposium shows us how collaboration among health professionals, government, and families can support new and innovative ideas that can be life-changing for many people. Building on Holland Bloorview's long history of supporting children and youth with different abilities, today's symposium continues that path forward where new ideas and leading research can be shared. It's exciting to see how research and innovation at Holland Bloorview, like the Research Family Engagement Committee, can positively impact children and their families by having families involved and engaged in the research. Things like having the family voice at the beginning and throughout the research, because understanding that their experience of being a parent, of a child with different abilities is invaluable. Or listening to young people sharing their stories about living with an acquired brain injury, and how the Autism Research Center's The Social ABCs program teaches parents much needed skills to help children communicate and share emotions. These are just some examples of the important work that families and team at Holland Bloorview have undertaken. And I can tell you that I do truly admire the work that you do. I have been a frequent visitor in the past, and I certainly hope I will continue to be a frequent visitor because I learn something every time I come here. It's very important for me, I can tell you personally, to find ways to remove barriers and create opportunities for the members of our families, our communities, and people of all abilities across Ontario. I've worked with Autism Ontario, and as Julie mentioned, I have been deeply involved with the Ability Centre, where people of all ages and abilities can enrich their lives by engaging in social, health, and cultural programs. And I can tell you it is certainly my mission to make sure that there are more ability centers created across the province, because that's where we can show the kind of inclusion that we really want to see happen in society and lead the way and make sure it does happen across our province. It was also my privilege to serve as Ontario's first patient ombudsman, where I listened to families and helped to advocate for them. And of course, as many of you know, I am also the proud mother of a son with different abilities. So I can tell you that through my life as a mother, a lawyer, a volunteer, an MPP, and as patient ombudsman, they've all helped to prepare me for my new role and my new position as Ontario's Minister of Health and Long-Term Care. And what I'm trying to do as Minister is to combine both the need to be empathetic, as I am, to young people and to their families, but I also have to engage in pragmatic decision-making to make sure that we have a sustainable healthcare system that's going to last for generations to come. So I'm working on both of those, but certainly when I come here and I see the children and young people and what Lazy Legs has taught us today, that continues to inspire me in the work that I'm doing. And I know that it's more important now than forever to make sure that government and healthcare system work hand in hand so that people can see that we are working together and we are working to support their needs and advance the cause. And I can tell you that we want to work with our partners in healthcare, that I am listening to what you want to tell me, what I see at places like Holland Bloorview and other centers across Ontario, and especially listening to families who can teach us so much through their own lived experience. I can't stress enough how important collaboration is, seeing the picture from all sides and finding answers that bring together ideas from health professionals, researchers, and of course from the family perspective. Listening to one another can be our greatest strength in finding healthcare solutions that can benefit us all. So that's why I'm so excited to see discussions like those happening today. I understand you've been involved in breakout sessions. You're listening to each other, learning from each other's ideas. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you so much again for inviting me to join you.
Thank you very much, Minister Elliott, for your wonderful remarks, for your support, and for reminding us how important collaboration is and how important it is to integrate the family voice into everything we do, into research. Thank you very, very much for everything. Thank you. So at this time, I am very honored and very excited to introduce our lived experience keynote of the day, Emily Chan. Emily is a former client, volunteer, chair of Holland Bloorview's Youth Advisory Council, advocate, researcher, and ambassador. She is currently at the University of Toronto pursuing a double major in mental health studies and health policy, completing her final year of undergraduate studies this year. Upon graduation, Emily hopes to pursue a master's degree and to one day be a part of key policy reform to shape the Canadian healthcare system. Outside of the classroom, Emily is actively involved in her community by advocating for accessibility rights, inclusion, and change. Some of her notable roles include a peer academic coach for the University of Toronto and spearheading an accessibility project with the University of Toronto's Advisory Committee on Accessibility. We are so grateful and incredibly fortunate to have Emily here with us today, sharing her inspiring story. Her talk is titled Resistance to Resilience. Please join me in welcoming Emily.
So folks, I do want to start off with a question, and that is if this is working. Yes, okay. So what is resilience? When you hear this word, what do you think about? Is it a person? Is it an image? Is it a symbol? Who do you think of, or what do you think of, and why do you think of that? I'll give you a few seconds to kind of ponder that over. All right, that's enough pondering. Okay. So when I think of this word resilience, I actually think of a rubber ball, and this might seem like a bit of a strange analogy, but bear with me, I'll explain. So when you think about a rubber ball, it has a very bouncy quality to it, and if you think about it, if you throw these balls onto the ground, they come right back up as soon as you throw them down, and they actually bounce back up even higher than when you throw them down initially. And I think this is what resilience is all about. It's about taking life challenges and what life throws at you and rising above it and taking whatever obstacles that you are facing and overcoming it and coming out of them even stronger than ever. So good afternoon, folks. As you probably heard, my name is Emily. I am a student, aspiring researcher, youth mentor, disability advocate, probably a lot more things that I'm missing, but I'm here today to share my story of resilience. So my story actually starts when I was born. On the first day that I was born, doctors kind of knew that there was something amiss because they noticed that I wasn't taking down my milk properly and I wasn't crying as loudly as other babies would cry. And through a lot of different rigorous testing, they did eventually diagnose me with a rare neuromuscular condition called central nuclear myopathy. Now, this is like I was saying, rare neuromuscular condition that affects all my muscles in my body and leaves all of my muscles to be relatively weaker than most. And because this disability is so rare, my doctors really wanted to get a better sense of what this disability encapsulated and what it was about. So I spent the first 6 months of my life living at Sick Kids, while doctors were able to run a lot of different tests and diagnose my disability. Now, at this point, my disability was not very well known. It's still not very well known and not very well understood. So doctors really wanted to make sure to put in that effort to make sure that I was getting the best treatment as possible. And this was a very weak point in my life because during my 6 months at Sick Kids, I actually code blued twice, and doctors had to work to revive me back to life. And my parents were, of course, very scared during this time, and the doctors actually told my parents at one point, okay, well, your daughter's prognosis seems relatively grim. Do you want to continue with treatment, or do you just want to give up? And my parents, being the wonderful people that they are, they said, heck no, we're going to keep going. How dare you even suggest such a ludicrous idea? And we wanted to keep going, and so we did. And I think this was the first time that I really encountered what resilience meant. And so I have my parents as early models of what resilience means, and that's where I get a lot of my ideas that I have now. So doctors continued to work on me, and I eventually was deemed stable enough to move out of Sick Kids and move to Holland Bloorview, where my medical team wanted me to continue with treatment. And that is what is reflected here. Yep. So when I moved to Holland Bloorview, I started out, again, very weak. If we go back to the last photo here, if you notice on the bottom left-hand corner, that photo with the lovely Elmo, shows me not being able to lift up my own head. And this was the point where I started treatment. It was a point where I wasn't able to lift up my own head. I wasn't speaking. I wasn't able to take down food or anything like that. So I started therapy at a very, very weak point in my life. So I hated therapy. I'm just going to throw that out there. It was not fun. I had to do a lot of different therapies. I spent the first 6 years of my life here at Holland Bloorview as an inpatient, working on different forms of treatment like occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech language pathology. You name it, I probably went through rigorous treatments of whatever treatment you can think of. So I hated therapy because it was so grueling, so tiring, and I'm pretty sure most of us can relate when it comes to exercise. It's not something that we like to do. So imagine that, but 6 years, and I had to go through it so many times, and it was just so rigorous, so painful, but I knew I had to do it. It was good for me, and my parents really encouraged me to keep going. So eventually I was able to hold up my own head, as you can see from these photos here. And not only that, I was able to learn how to speak, which was a really significant milestone for me because I was operating on a pointing system before I was learning how to speak, and I used a communication device, but those aren't always the best way to get your point across, and it would be very frustrating when I would point to something and I would get misunderstood. So that was extremely frustrating, and I think that was part of the reason why I wanted to continue with therapy, even though I hated it. It's because I knew it was good for me, and I was able, even at an early age, to see the impact it would have on my life. So I did persist, I did keep going, and eventually I was able to do, like drive a wheelchair, hold up my own head like I was saying before, and make all those different sort of advancements, which I'm really proud of, actually. And so moving right along, I have more pictures of me at Holland Bloorview. This was me, I guess, doing more active activities, and not only was I an inpatient doing medical services here, but I also attended the integrated school program at Holland Bloorview, which was a really good opportunity for me to be able to learn other typically developing children. And this was actually the first time that I felt that my disability didn't kind of hinder me from being able to integrate with other children, typically developing children. So I was able to learn through kindergarten, through grade 1 with my peers and to socialize with them. So this was a really integral part of my social well-being, social development, and what have you. So even though I was part of a really good school system, I did have a lot of challenges as an inpatient because I did face a lot of feelings of loneliness, isolation. If you think about it, being an inpatient can be kind of lonely at times because you're in an isolated environment with a lot of different adults around you. They're pretty scary from a child's perspective because they're all professionals in what they do and whatnot. So there wasn't really any sort of children for me to interact with. So that was pretty lonely at times, but I do have my parents to thank because they really helped me overcome a lot of these barriers, and their dedication was just amazing because they would come every single day to see how I was doing, to play with me, to teach me those valuable life lessons that a parent would. And to give you some perspective, my dad was working a full-time job, and he would be working all day, And he would still make an effort to come at around 10 or 11 p.m., even after he was done work. And he would still come by to see how I was doing, to see if I needed any help with anything. So I don't think I can begin to express how grateful I am to my parents, because I truly, without them, I would not be here. They're actually here today, so I'm kind of obligated to thank them. No, I'm kidding. No. Yeah, Mom and Dad are over there. So through all of my hard work, doing a lot of rehab, my parents pushing me to do the very best I could, and because of my medical team that I had, which was so great, I was actually able to be discharged at age 6. I was able to go home and live a relatively normal life with my parents, and this was a very significant milestone for me and my parents, because this was not something that I had previously experienced, and I got to be able to go home, see my parents every single day, go on outings and do all sorts of childhood things, I guess. And this was a milestone that still means so much to me, because it's a true testament to how far a person can come, even if they're pushed to their limits, and they can still go beyond their limits and reach their full potential, which is something that still drives me today. And it's another form of resilience building, which I will continue to talk more about later on. So I kind of skipped a whole bunch of my life, so we're gonna fill that in now. Post-discharge, I still received a lot of services here at Bloorview. I was able to do a lot of therapy, still physiotherapy. I did a lot of swallowing therapy. I saw different sort of clinics here. I saw the seating clinic, dental clinic. I saw a lot of different professionals, and this was until I was about 18 years old, where I eventually transitioned out of Bloorview, but I'll talk about that a bit later. And as I grew up and kept coming back to Bloorview and reflecting on how much of an impact this organization has meant to me, I really wanted to give back in some capacity, because this place had poured in so much to me, and I wanted to pour back into the organization in some regard. So the first, I guess, encounter that was outside the clinical setting was a program called Youth at Work, and this was a program that gives youth with disabilities the opportunity to learn how to do things like interview skills, resume writing skills, disclosing your disability during an interview. And these are all really critical skills that people need to learn. And I'm super grateful that I was able to do it in a space that I was familiar with. I could get feedback. I wasn't afraid to fail, because there were so many familiar faces that would keep encouraging me. Dolly being one of them. Dolly's sitting right there as well. So yeah, I was able to get those skills and develop along. And I did 2 placements because of this program. I did my placement in the community, and I also worked with HR for about 2 weeks, so that was pretty cool. And the next thing I want to talk about is how I volunteered, and I'm still volunteering with Bloorview. One of the earliest memories I have for volunteering is being a youth mentor, and this is something I still do today, and this is where I work with different clients and families who are new to Bloorview or who are still transitioning in and are willing to hear what I have to say, and me being able to share my own lived experience, which I'm sure many of you know is a really big and important topic. And it's so important that we listen to stories of lived experience to see how we can take those lessons and adapt them to our own lives and incorporate them into how we conduct ourselves as beings. So I'm really glad I was able to share some of my own stories, some of my own lessons that I've learned, and to pass those on to children and families who are still transitioning into this new environment, which can be really scary. So I really recognize that. And another program that I really got involved with, and I'm still involved with, is the Youth Advisory Council, which, for those who don't know, is a council that has a collection of current or former clients at Holland Bloorview, and we're able to meet around once a month and provide our input into different hospital projects, whether it be research, whether it be inserting the charging stations that you see in the cafeteria. That was part of the work that we did. So being able to, again, use our own lived experience to inform research and inform practice here at Holland Bloorview is something that I really believe in. So it kind of came full circle because I'm actually the chair of the council now, so that's pretty exciting. Fast forward a little bit to post-teenage years, I eventually was able to graduate high school and I moved on to post-secondary. I'm currently at the U of T finishing up my undergrad in mental health studies and health policy. I like to say health sciences because it sounds cooler, but health policy is really the name of it. So this was actually a really interesting time in my life because not only was I transitioning into post-secondary, but I was also transitioning in terms of moving out of Holland Bloorview as a client and into the community as an outpatient and as a adult service, into the adult service world. So this was a really scary time for me, and I didn't know how to handle things because there were a lot of unknowns, and I'm a person who likes to know things ahead of time. I like to have a plan, and not knowing what was next was really scary. And I remember being in my first year of university, and I wasn't feeling like I was able to belong. I didn't feel like I was able to succeed in this space because, it's U of T. It's such a world-renowned institution, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think it's a pretty great school. But, in my first year, I wasn't able to feel like I felt like I belonged there. So, in a sense, it was a sort of imposter syndrome type of feeling. And I kind of wasn't able to do a lot other than keep my head down and study. That was all I knew how to do, so that's what I continued doing. And it wasn't until I went through my first year and I got my grades back and I started to realize, okay, maybe I can do this university thing. And I think another form of enablement that really helped me were my friends, and this is where we'll show the pictures. In the top right-hand corner, you will see my truly amazing friends who have been with me throughout my 4 years, and it's because of them that I was able to really come out of my shell and to feel like I was able to seek out other opportunities outside of my studies, and they really affirmed for me that I was doing enough, that I was able to succeed within the university setting. So again, another form of resiliency comes in the form of friends, comes in the form of parents, and validation that you get throughout, whether it be academic validation or other forms of validation. So yeah, this was a really great opportunity for me to start reaching out after I was more comfortable within my university, and so I started to branch out, do a lot more volunteering. I am now still doing a lot of mentoring work, which was really inspired by the work I do here at Holland Bloorview. I loved just being able to share my own experiences and to help guide younger youth. So this is what I strive to do now, where I still work with first-year students and I still help them to transition into university. And it's so crucial to have this as a starting point because if you're able to start off strong, you're able to continue strong. So that's something I really advocate for and I believe in. And, I'm still very busy. I still do a lot of work at Holland Bloorview, a lot of volunteering work, a lot of outreach opportunities, as well as doing stuff at my university. So I'm pretty busy. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about my own research experience. I was very fortunate enough to have the chance to do the Word Family Summer Student Program, which is a 4-month summer internship that leads undergraduates across Canada, across Ontario, across Canada. Okay, so it's a really great chance for students to connect with Holland Bloorview scientists and researchers and to get that really crucial taste of what research is like. So I was able to work under the guidance of Dr. Sally Lindsay, and she really taught me a lot about, what employment is, and she does a lot of work around employment and youth and what it means to be a youth with a disability and to go through the transitioning phases. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity as well. I was able to learn to grow as a researcher and to really build my love for research. And I also got a poster publication out of it, as well as a journal publication, so I'm really grateful for that. And besides being a great learning opportunity, it also looks really good on my CV, so I'm really grateful for that as well. So you're probably wondering what I'm up to now. In short, this is still my future, U of T. I somehow would like to continue at U of T. U of T is a great school, don't get me wrong, but I just find myself so attracted to the work that U of T does. So I am, like you heard earlier, applying for my master's degree. I submitted my application for OISE about 2 weeks ago. I'm looking to do the MA in clinical and counseling psychology, where I hope to continue my research in terms of mental health and disability, which are two very important parts of my life that I encountered, and I really want to see how these two constructs kind of fit together. And I'm also applying for public health, social work, and occupational therapy. So I'm doing a wide, diverse amount of applications. So if any of you know anybody, no, I'm kidding. So this kind of leads me to the main lesson that I was able to get out of my life thus far, and that's what you see on the screen right now, how it's so important to have individuals with lived experience to be involved in any sort of capacity whatsoever. And it really is important to have those stories informing whatever we do, whether it be research, whether it be policy reform. And it's nice to have people that are champions, but what better champion than the individual themselves who have been through all the hardships and to know and to be able to speak about the little nuances that might be otherwise missed. So that's something that I really want to push for. And there are actually 3 main lessons that I would like you folks to start thinking about. And the first one is to do with mental health. And I'm a really big advocate of mental health because not only did I talk about it earlier with my social isolation and loneliness in terms of being an inpatient, but I'm really open with my mental health struggles. I do struggle with anxiety, and I have a lot of high standards for myself when it comes to academic achievement. So anxiety is something that I really struggle with even today. But there are some folks who aren't as open to their mental health struggles. So I really want to be able to bridge that gap between those, especially individuals with disabilities, because the research does show that these individuals are at a higher risk of developing or facing mental health challenges. So I really want to be able to challenge you folks today to think about how we can begin building a connection between youth with disabilities and mental health challenges. And eventually I do want to see a system or a rehab system where we're able to talk about mental health as just as part of any other conversation that we're having, and to not feel like we have to explicitly think about, I have to ask my client about how they're doing mentally, but it's just a part of their holistic well-being. So this is something that I really want to challenge you folks to recognize and to keep working on, because Bloorview is doing such a great job in being leaders of change, leaders of setting best practices. So if we're going to stay ahead of the game, we need to be able to develop those best practices first and to act as examples for other places to follow. So this is something that I really hope that we strive to do. And secondly, I do want to focus a little bit on knowledge exchange versus knowledge translation. Knowledge translation is something that we're very familiar with here at Bloorview. It's where we take research and we inform practices, but I think there's always room to improve, because knowledge exchange, it talks about not only leading research leading practice, but also practice leading research as well. And this is a sort of cycle that we may not always think about. So it's something that I really want to see happen, because if I had known half of what I did about my condition now, I probably would have approached rehab differently. And we're already living in such a very siloed healthcare system. So I don't think we need our research and practice to be siloed as well. So we need to begin building those bridges and to have those two places talking to each other and consistently talking to each other, and not being afraid to ask questions or to challenge ideas that might come up. So that's something that I want you folks to think about as well. And lastly, I do want to talk about our global perspective, which is the main topic of today's symposium, and how we can begin to make research accessible to all. And by accessible, I don't only mean disseminating it in a way that everybody can access, but it's about thinking about the differing needs of different people who read this research. So what about those who might not have English as their first language? What about those who are visually impaired? And this was a point that I really wanted to drive home, because my parents are actually Chinese immigrants, and English is their first language, and me always having to be that. My mic just kind of blew up, but that's fine. So being that liaison between medical professionals during appointments and them, I always had to do that translating piece, and a lot of nuances would get lost in the translation, because, as I'm sure you know, English is a very unique language, and we sometimes have words for things that other cultures might not have words in. So I really want to be able to see a world of research that caters to differing needs, and we already are doing this through our lay summaries project. And for those who aren't familiar with that, it's a project where we're looking to disseminate research in a way that includes accessible language, and it's including lay language to cater to the needs of the lay audience. But I think we can do more in terms of translating different languages and making sure that research is truly accessible to all, so that we can continue to learn, to grow, and to take the lessons from research and apply it to our lives. So I think that's all I have prepared. I'm going to open up questions now. If anyone has any questions, free. Anyone? Yes. Hi.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. Your entire life story was just absolutely so touching. I really appreciate it. And I want to congratulate you on your accomplishments, because you are the picture of resilience for sure.
Thank you.
And finally, I wanted to ask you, did you memorize that entire speech? Because, oh my gosh, you said everything with such great articulation.
Thank you.
And you were on topic and on point. So you are incredible.
I did. I rehearsed in my room for about a week. I told my parents, put your headphones in so that you're not spoiling anything. So I was walking around my room, pacing around like a crazy person, talking to myself. So yes, I did memorize, and I did want to make sure that I was able to present my best self here today. So thank you so much for your kind words.
Thank you.
And so thank you again. If any of you folks wanted to connect or collaborate, perhaps, my email is up on the screen right there. So I'd love to hear any feedback about my presentation, or if any of you folks wanted to connect, talk more about different challenges or how I can help in any way. I'm really open to differing conversations. And so much again for listening. Okay.
Thank you so much, Emily. We're so lucky to have you involved here and to benefit from your wisdom, from your experience, and from your expertise and from your knowledge. So thank you for everything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Oh, wow. That's so cute. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we're going to start our second round of quick hits, and I'll just ask for this time if we could save our applause. I know it's very hard to wait until the end, but we'll wait until the end of our quick hit session to applaud for everybody. Thank you.
I'm Dana, and I'm a research coordinator within the Concussion Center, and I'm here to introduce you today to our School First project. Concussion symptoms, it's not going. Concussion symptoms impact a student's ability to participate, learn, and perform while in school. The effects of concussion on the return to school experience can be unique to each student. This can make the return to school process complex and challenging for all those involved. Return to school protocols are available and often mandated in the school settings. They tell educators what to do with respect to helping youth transition back to school following a concussion. However, teachers don't know how to bring these protocols to life. Therefore, we sought to address this gap and created School First. School First is an interactive PDF that was created over a series of phases and is based on the needs of students, their parents and caregivers, teachers, and healthcare providers, combined with available best evidence. We know that it takes a collaborative approach by all these key stakeholders in order to help students return to school successfully. From our evaluative research, we learned that teachers felt the resource was easy to use, they were satisfied with the resource, and that they would recommend it to others. After using the resources, educators felt that it was easy, After using the resources, educators felt they learned a lot about a topic that they knew nothing about and that they have a clear idea on how to support their students. Our next step is to explore opportunities to get this into the hands of all education personnel across the country. So please go download your free copy today and share it with all educators that you know from hollandbloorview.ch/schoolfirst. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from the Pearl Lab, and this is Myopathy. It's a video game like many others, except it's controlled by gesturing with your hand. And we built it to help people practice movements that are important anytime that you want to reach or grasp at something. Okay? So as a result, it has a few special pieces to it. It's flexible, and by that I mean it doesn't really matter how fast or how big you can open your hand. As long as you're trying the movement, you should be doing pretty well in the game. The other thing is that it reads these movements that you're doing, and it gives you feedback about them, so that you're practicing something that will actually help you do what you want to do. So we spent the last 2 years making sure that it actually was flexible and did provide useful feedback. We invited 10 young people who have cerebral palsy to help us build this game. They were either here, clients at Bloorview, or they're from Foundation Ellen Poidet at a hospital outside of Paris, France, where I spent the last year. And we had them come, they played the game, and we found out what part of the controller worked well, what parts needed tweaking, and what part of the feedback they received, and what parts they didn't. We did that with people who have different abilities, with people who have different experiences or affinities to the games, and we continued this process until we were really happy with it. Now, our design sessions are done and our game's set up, and we just started our first round of home testing, and some people are enjoying it.
I hope I get my last trophy. Don't miss any, okay?
I think you might do it.
Yeah, I will.
Ooh! You did it!
I broke my record!
That's awesome. Give me some of that. Hold on, let's see what this is. Let's see what
So hopefully it can be used as an outlet to practice therapeutically relevant movements from the home to complement traditional treatments. If you do want to talk about the algorithms that we made and the feedback mechanisms, all that type of stuff, I'd love to talk about that. If you just want to play it, we can do that too. Thanks.
Hi there. My name is Zack Priest, and I'm with the Trail Lab. And this is our study on accessible and inclusive transportation for youth with disabilities. And we run a group where we were developing innovative solutions. So access to reliable transportation is critical to quality of life, inclusion, and independence for youth with disabilities and their families. 190,000 people with disabilities in Canada have difficulty using public transportation, and 27,000 experiences challenges when riding in a car. So what we did was we hosted 2 mini hackathons, which were creative problem-solving sessions on accessible and inclusive transportation for people with disabilities. We used these opportunities to brainstorm ideas about public transportation, obtaining driver's licenses, family transportation, and we invited youth parents, clinicians, researchers, and community stakeholders to join the conversation and share their ideas. The workshops resulted in 122 different solutions. 76 were from youth and parents, and 46 were from stakeholders. Although there were considerable overlap within the ideas generated between the groups, they each prioritized them differently. The following themes emerged across the 2 groups. Prioritized solutions were training, so people like to talk about public transit and school bus drivers, training and for youth to learn how to navigate the public transit system, funding and advocacy, public awareness of needs, more accessible vehicles, and improved efficiency, flexible policies, better collaboration, and information sharing between agencies. Thank you so much for listening today, and if you have any more questions, please feel free to contact Sally Lindsay. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Helena Kita. I'm a former Ward Summer student, and today I'll be presenting our work on social support and concussions. So to date, we've completed 4 semi-structured interviews with high school-aged youth exploring their lived experiences during concussion recovery. Those interviews have focused on youth perspectives on psychosocial difficulties, as well as the role of social support, asking specifically who are key providers of social support, what does that social support actually look like, and how is it being provided, and what impact does that have on the concussion recovery process. Youth have highlighted multiple psychosocial difficulties, including feeling socially isolated because they're stuck at home recovering, can't participate in the same extracurriculars, and can't hang out with their friends in loud environments, that they're having difficulties managing school and accessing accommodations, as well as experiencing tricky questions from friends, such as, are you faking it to get out of school, and why is recovery taking so long? In terms of social support, what youth have highlighted is that parents may be a key source of instrumental support, whereas peers may be a better source of emotional support, that concussion knowledge can act as a barrier or facilitator to providing meaningful social support, and that and peers with previous concussion experience and personal concussion experience are particularly important supports. I just want to end with a quote that highlights the importance of both the importance of concussion knowledge and personal experience, and distinguishing between a less helpful friend and a more helpful friend. So this is a quote from a participant. On the top, she's talking about a less helpful friend. So with someone who didn't have the experience, it was more robotic. It was as if they had read up online and said, this is what I'm supposed to do, and did it. And she contrasts this below with a more helpful friend. With my friend, she knew what it felt like, and she was able to create the environment that she personally wanted when she had her concussion. If anyone has any questions or would like to talk to me about the project further, you can contact me at the email address above. Thank you.
I'm Yanni Hamdani. My postdoctoral research in the Profile Lab focused on understanding wellness promotion for youth labeled with intellectual and developmental disabilities. These youth are more likely to experience diminished wellness across multiple areas, including physical, social, and emotional wellness compared to their non-disabled peers. Yet little is known about how wellness is understood by this group and how it's promoted and addressed. To address this knowledge gap, we partnered with Special Olympics for this study. Special Olympics, as you may know, offers both competitive and recreational sports programs for people labeled with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our aims were to understand what contributes to a sense of wellness and what wellness goals are important in the everyday lives of athletes. I interviewed athletes, age 14 to 25, parents and coaches about athletes' experiences of wellness. The athletes then participated in a second go-along interview in which I went along or participated with them in an activity that they associated with feeling good or happy. Examples included taekwondo, swimming, basketball, and baseball. And I hit a line drive to left field, by the way. Physical activity is what attracted families to Special Olympics at first, but participation in these programs had a positive impact on social, emotional, and other aspects of wellness. Participants also identified important goals, including being happy, having fun and a sense of belonging, developing confidence and life skills, and creating respite opportunities for families. Our next steps include developing a range of wellness resources tailored to athletes, families, and coaches, and conducting similar research with Holland Bloorview clients and families. For more information, feel free to contact Amy McPherson, my postdoc supervisor, my former postdoc supervisor, or me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Stevens. I'd like to share our work on children's informed decision-making in their own participation in research. Research processes typically involve recruitment of participants, followed by discussions of consent and assent forms. There are key components of assent and consent that should be discussed in this process. However, the policies around what information children should understand about their own participation is vague. Our team developed the Meaning of Affirmative Agreement Measure, or the MAM, child and parent versions. The MAM asks about each of the 20 elements of consent and flags any items that children do not understand. This allows researchers to go back and re-explain any items that might have been difficult for them. Children complete the MAM-C based on their own level of understanding, and parents complete the MAM-P based on what they think their child understands about the elements of consent. We wanted to know whether the MAM would help us learn what children do and do not understand about the elements of informed consent in their research participation. We recruited 11 children and their parents. We had 6 children with typical development and 5 with cerebral palsy. And following their completion of their respective MAMs, we had one extra step for the children. For the items that they said yes to understanding, we went back and asked them to explain what they meant from that understanding. And we really wanted to get a deeper sense of their comprehension. In terms of the results for the whole group together, we found that parents reported their children understood 87% of the elements of consent. We found that children themselves indicated they understood 70% of the elements of consent, suggesting that parents are overestimating their children's level of understanding. When we went back and asked the children to explain those items that they said yes to understanding, children were able to express understanding to 54% of those items. We found that younger children tended to have more difficulty explaining those items they said they did understand. Taken together, the MAM provides opportunities for parents, children, adolescent participants to be better informed about their own participation in research and helps enhance their inclusivity in this decision-making process. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Sally, and this is Alicia Brown. And together we have the privilege of working with Dr. Scratch and an interdisciplinary team on a project to enhance educators' knowledge of acquired brain injury. Acquired brain injury is damage to the brain that occurs after birth from either a traumatic or a non-traumatic event. It is the leading cause of disability in children, but despite such high prevalence rates, Ontario educators receive no training at either the pre-service or practicing levels regarding children with ABI. Additionally, acquired brain injury is not recognized as an area of special educational need, making it extremely difficult for these children to receive the support they need.
So through our project, we are creating a user-driven, evidence-based e-learning module to improve Ontario education's awareness and understanding of ABI. In October 2017, we conducted a needs assessment workshop with educators and determined that they desired a short, engaging e-learning intervention tool to improve their understanding of ABI. Then we reviewed gray literature to determine the resources that currently exist for educators. Currently, we are working with an interdisciplinary team of experts to build the module curriculum using a unique case study approach.
So the next steps for our project will be in early 2019 to build the module with an e-learning specialist. Once we have a draft of this, we will send this to our expert team for feedback on this stage before piloting the project with 3 schools and the educators at these schools in the Toronto District School Board and the Durham District School Board.
Thank you to our interdisciplinary team for their support, and if you'd like more information, please contact Dr. Shannon Scratch.
Thank you to our quick hit presenters for such parsimonious presentations. I'm thrilled to introduce now our third research talk of the day, co-presented by Dr. Darcy Fellings, Senior Clinician Scientist here at Bloorview, Dr. Richard Winto, Assistant Director at the Center of Applied Genomics at Sick Kids, and parent Grace Zellick. Welcome.
Great. So we don't have any cool dance moves, but hopefully we have a good story. So many of you might have wondered why we're spending billions of dollars on genomic research. And hopefully at the end of this research presentation, you'll get a glimmer into some of the stories genomics can tell us. So we're really excited to be here today to share our story and why we think it's important for children with CP. I'm going to start the story, and I'm going to introduce a research project that we've been working on. And then Dr. Richard Winto is the Assistant Director for the Center for Applied Genomics, and he's going to tell you about the results of the story. But I think the highlight of our story today is going to be Grace, who's going to share, as mother to Sammy, how genomics has impacted her daughter's care. And then I'll come up and finish with a few closing comments. So we're interested in further understanding the cause of cerebral palsy for children. Many parents who have a child with cerebral palsy really want to understand why. And recently, the genetic contribution to causing CP has really been getting increased attention. So in the olden days, we used to blame the obstetrician, but increasingly we're finding that genomics is playing a part. So in some of the recent studies, we found this thing called genomic variation present in between 10 to 20% of children with cerebral palsy. And this is in comparison to the general population where it would be 0.1%. So our aim in this particular research study that we're going to tell you about today is to look at the genomic contribution in hemiplegic cerebral palsy, which is the most common type of cerebral palsy. And this is where you have difficulty moving one side of the leg, one side of the body. So what are we talking about with genomics and copy number variants? There's all these definitions, but just keep in mind, if we're looking at genomics, we're looking at a disorder of the alphabet soup of our genes. So we know our genes are made up of lots of letters in particular orders, and a copy number variant, or CNV, you can have missing letters, or you can have extra letters, and that's called duplication. And if you have a missing part or an extra part that's in a gene that's impacting on how you form an important brain protein, this could then lead to a problem with your motor control, which could be diagnosed as cerebral palsy. So how did we do this study? When we do genomic research, we have to have lots of different children participate in the research. So this is a collaborative project funded through the Ontario Brain Institute. And we recruited 300 children over many different children's treatment centers in Ontario. And then what we did was we had the child spit into a little tube, and we had the parents spit into a little tube, and then we sent the tubes to Richard. And then the DNA was extracted from the saliva, and we looked at the genomics. So I'm now going to turn it over to Richard to tell you a little bit about our results.
Great, thanks, Darcy. So as Darcy mentioned, this is a type of genetic study or genomic study that we call a trio design study. And I've illustrated that up on the left here. So a trio is nothing more complex than one person who has cerebral palsy and both biological parents. And the reason we look at family structures like this is that that lets us determine which changes in genes are inherited and which ones are arising new in the young person, in the child. This happens all the time, and we call these changes de novo changes. That's a Latin term. It just means it happened new. So in the study that Darcy mentioned, we've studied just under 100 families, which is quite a lot for this kind of study. Our next phase is going to actually look at a mixed cohort of people with all different subtypes of cerebral palsy, and that'll be about 150 families, and we're just putting the nuts and bolts on all the documentation that we need to get that study started. So what did we find? So at the top here, this is the article that we published in Genetics and Medicine. This is an open access article, so any of you can download it and read it. I will warn you, it is a little bit technical, but it is freely available for you. We discovered that close to 25% of the children that we studied had changes in genes that seemed to be linked to CP in one way or another. Most of these significant findings were in genes that are known or suspected to be involved in the early stages of the development of the nervous system, which makes sense. When we looked at these very large duplications and deletions, these large copy number variations that Darcy mentioned, we found de novo or new changes in about 7% of the children in our study, and that is a lot compared to the general population. And the next thing we want to do is do a much more expanded study on those 150 families, which is sequencing every single letter of the genome, start to finish, including all the genes and everything else that is hiding in the genome, and look at the totality of what is in those genomes. So we might find much more than 20 or 25%. We don't know yet, but we want to do the experiment. So what does this tell us? Well, one of the things that we looked at was, of all the genes in all the patients in CP that we discovered, what are they doing? And one thing that we looked at very carefully was which of these genes are involved in, or switched on or turned on or expressed, as we call it in genetic speak, in the brain and in the central nervous system. And so we leveraged a huge body of knowledge, including some of the data from the Allen Brain Atlas, which we heard a little bit about this morning, and we asked this question. And what it turns out is that many of the most significantly associated genes that we found are in this kind of pink football in the top left corner here, and those are ones that are turned on or expressed prenatally in the developing brain. So our most significant hits were in the prenatal brain as compared with child or teen in green, or the adult brain, which is in purple on the right there. So that's maybe not surprising, but it was a very interesting finding and sort of fits with what we think we know about CP. So the other thing I wanted to emphasize is that we're studying the genomics of CP to understand how CP works and how it arises, but at the very same time, what people with CP who are enrolled in our studies are teaching us is a lot about how the central nervous system works in general, and that's kind of a really exciting and interesting thing. So one theme we've heard a lot about today is how do we take things global? How do we collaborate internationally? And I'm happy to tell you that we have an international consortium, an international cerebral palsy genomics consortium. This was kicked off with a meeting in Adelaide, Australia in March of 2017. I'm in that picture somewhere. And we had a follow-on meeting this year in Zhengzhou, China in April, and both Darcy and I are in this picture somewhere. So there's a lot going on. And one of the big things we can do with these kinds of huge international collaborations is begin to get at this idea of what is personalized medicine. How can we find changes in the genomes of each individual person and use those changes to inform each individual person's therapy or treatment? So this is personalized medicine or precision medicine. You'll hear a lot about this in the newspapers. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to tell you. So now we're going to hear from Grace about her own personalized medicine story. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm Grace Selleck, and my daughter Samantha is an inpatient here, or outpatient at Holland Bloorview, as well. She went to Bloorview School for 3 years. And my daughter has a rare de novo genetic variation called CTNNB1. And this is her story. So Sammy, as we call her, was born in the summer of 2010. I had a very normal pregnancy, nothing out of the ordinary, and she was a full-term baby. In fact, she was 1 week late, but she was born with an emergency C-section and had a 3-day stay in the NICU because she was having trouble breathing. Now, as first-time parents, me and my husband were happy and blissful for the first 6 to 12 months, as we should be, even though there was a few things that were off. I know my mom kept saying, well, why isn't she sitting up? Why isn't she crawling like other kids should be at this age? But as a first-time mom, I kept thinking, well, all kids develop at their own pace and at their own time, so I was trying not to stress out about it. However, she was the first baby to roll over in my mom's skirt too at 6 months. So, I hoped that she would continue to progress. But the progress did slow. So eventually I kept hoping she would catch up to her peers, but she started to miss her milestones. So finally at 12 months, we had to come to terms and admit that something was amiss. And we had to push for a referral to some specialists upon my family's insistence. And we started to see many amazing doctors here at Bloorview at Sick Kids. And we got an initial clinical working diagnosis of CP. And as we were coming to terms with Sammy's disability, we found a wonderful preschool for her where they cater to kids with special needs. We started a variety of different therapies and different treatments, everything from physiotherapy, occupational therapy, conductive education, Botox. And working with her doctors, we wanted to verify her diagnosis. So she went through a whole ton of tests, an MRI, metabolics, she did a lumbar puncture to test for responsive dystonia. And eventually, we were offered a WES, which is a whole exome sequence, which is genetic testing. Because everything was coming back inconclusive. So her WES, the genetic testing, was done under research and development. So we knew there would be a long wait. And that was back in 2013. So in the meantime, my hubby, who I give full credit, does most of the research in our house, suggested we try something a little bit out of the box. He wanted to try Cinnamon, which is carbidopa carbidopa. It's a medication that impacts a protein to help generate dopamine in the brain. Now, this Cinemat, we actually had to push one of Sammy's doctors, in fact, to try it because she didn't think it would work. But we insisted on it. And I gotta tell you, it has impacted Sammy's mobility, her fine motor skills, and her speech quite dramatically. So I'm actually gonna read a letter from the executive director of the preschool that she went to. And I'm sorry, but I have to read it because I wanna make sure I get it right. She wrote, I don't remember ever in a 30-plus year history of working with children seeing such a positive change in physical ability in a very short time frame. You and Stu, and especially Sammy, are so courageous in thinking outside the box to try the Cinemat. She walked independently to me today. I know you have all seen it, but the experience just blew me away. So this shows the Cinemat was obviously making a huge impact and a huge difference. So years after starting Cinemat, we continued our therapies and treatment. We were feeling like we had a good handle on life. And, well, we decided to have a second child, and I got pregnant with our second daughter. I gotta tell you, I was thrilled, but terrified all at the same time. At this point, I was referred to a geneticist, and I was offered an expedited WES, the genetic testing, as we were still waiting at this point over 2 years for the results from our first test, which was being done under research and development. I still remember the day we got the results. It was my 40th birthday, and I was 7 months pregnant. And we got the news, CTNNB1, a genomic variation that happened in utero. And we finally had something conclusive. And so getting this genetic news was a relief. But I gotta tell you, they just said, keep doing exactly what you're doing. So we kept using the Cinemat, we continued all of our therapies, and we continued to build on all of Sammy's hard work. And all the treatments that we started under the CP diagnosis were working, but this new genetic information showed why the Cinemat was working. The underlying protein was responding to the medication to give Sammy increased function in many different areas. And her story is now being shared by one of her doctors in medical publications. Now, I feel that genetic testing should be more available to patients and families, potentially to open up treatments that may not otherwise be offered or given to them. And genomics is really advancing very quickly. I'll tell you, we did not spit into a tube the way they did. We actually had to do blood work to do ours. And I think it would be great for families to have the option of doing this genetic testing to see if there are any underlying genetic variations that could benefit from specific treatments. At the end of the day, I feel, and I think we all do, we want to see the kids, whether they're our own or our patients, we want them to have the best opportunities to function and succeed in life. Thanks for listening to me and Sammy's story, and I'm going to pass it on back to Darcy.
Nothing like a parent to really do a good job with the story. Thank you, Grace. So I have 4 closing comments. So the results of this research study really do support a strong genetic contribution to cerebral palsy. We had a quarter of our children have one of these rare copy number variants compared to that 0.1%. So there really seems to be a genomic story that we need to further explore. So the second point I want to make is this research study is really ahead of where we're at clinically. So we do have certain criteria that we can do genetic testing, but cerebral palsy isn't one of those criteria. And as researchers, what we're obligated to do is really try to start to tease out what are the implications of genomic testing in cerebral palsy. Should we be doing it on every child with cerebral palsy, or should it be a certain subgroup? The third comment I want to make is, I think if you're reading newspapers or following medical journals, we've heard a lot about the promise of precision medicine. And here, I think we've heard a really strong story about how we can use genomic medicine to help us make our treatments more specific. For Sammy, the Cinemat really helped to increase the dopamine level, and her dopamine level was low because of the protein that wasn't functioning well. So I do think it holds the opportunity to actually create more effective treatments for cerebral palsy, which I think we would all sign up for. The final comment I'll make is I do see genomic testing as creating a little bit of diagnostic confusion. So we think about cerebral palsy as being an umbrella diagnosis. It's a clinical diagnosis, but what should we be doing with this genomic testing? Does it change the diagnosis of cerebral palsy, or is it just additive? And for the majority of cases, how we're thinking about it and approaching it is we're looking at the genomics to give us insight into the cause, but still keeping that child under the umbrella of cerebral palsy. So thank you very much for your attention to our story today. Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy, Richard, and Grace, for a very insightful presentation. We now move on to our final segment of quick hits. And everybody's lined up already.
Awesome. So I am Kendall Cohen. I am a postdoc in the Trail Lab led by Sally Lindsay. And today I'm going to be briefly talking to you about the systematic review we did looking at e-mentoring programs and interventions for children and youth with disabilities. So mentoring programs are an effective and a powerful tool for increasing the inclusion and social support for children and youth with disabilities. However, these mentoring programs, or rather children and youth with disabilities, encounter difficulty finding and accessing mentors in a face-to-face format. So e-mentoring programs may be a viable approach for increasing the accessibility of mentors as well as reducing physical barriers. This thing is delayed. There we go. So what we did in this study was we reviewed, synthesized, and appraised research studies investigating e-mentoring for children and youth with disabilities. In other words, we wanted to find out more about these e-mentoring programs. We wanted to know what did they involve, what were the delivery formats, and how effective are they? So what we found was 25 studies that looked at the effectiveness of e-mentoring programs. And of these studies, 69% reported significantly improved outcomes. And some of these outcomes included improved self-determination, self-advocacy, and improved career decision-making self-efficacy. And you can't really see that on the slide. But these studies used a wide variety of e-mentoring delivery formats. So these included websites, apps, Skype calls, phone calls, and the most commonly used one there is email. So the take-home message that I want to leave you with is that based on our review, we find that e-mentoring is an effective approach for improving the inclusion of children and youth with disabilities. If you would like to know more about this review that we did and you didn't get a chance to come see my poster, you may email me at the email you see there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Leah. As a Ward Summer student, I had the privilege of examining the effect of active rehabilitation on the psychological well-being of youth with post-concussion symptoms. Mild traumatic brain injuries or concussions are on the rise in Ontario. 30% of youth with concussion experience persistent post-concussion symptoms, which occurs when physical, cognitive, and psychological difficulties persist beyond 1 month following injury. This can significantly disrupt youth's lives. Previously, the common treatment was complete rest. As you may imagine, this was associated with feasibility issues and secondary mental health challenges. So an active rehabilitation approach was developed, consisting of low-intensity aerobic exercise and concussion education. But there's limited multi-informant reported research examining the efficacy of this treatment on the psychological symptoms. So we sought to address this by examining the impact of the Concussion Center 6-week active rehab intervention on the psychological well-being of adolescents with post-concussion symptoms. We did this by analyzing a subset of pre-post questionnaire data from 33 youth and their parents. Findings suggest that active rehab was significantly associated with a reduction in psychological symptoms in a way that was meaningful to both parents and their kids. Youth reported significant decreases in anxiety and anger, and parents reported significant reductions in their children's levels of anxiety and depression, as well as somatic complaints. While more research needs to be done on optimal concussion recovery interventions, these findings were promising given that active rehab didn't directly target psychological symptoms, but these were reduced. This research wouldn't have been possible without the support of the ward family, my supervisors, and the clients and families that participated. And thank you everyone for listening, and to those who visited my poster.
Good afternoon. I'd like to take a second to picture your local recreation center and imagine walking into the gym and seeing children and youth with and without disabilities having fun and interacting in games and sports. This is what you'll see when you walk into an Igniting Fitness Possibilities session. So there are 4 main pillars to IFP: to increase the attitudes and confidence of the children and youth to engage in sport and physical activities, to foster friendships among those that participate in the program and that hopefully extending beyond that program, and to enhance the motivation to have lifelong physical activity engagement. So to do this, there are 2 main steps where one-on-one coaching is provided throughout. And I'm going to be focusing on the quick start phase. So this is a 16-week program where there's a group-based activity as well as one-on-one coaching that really tailors the activities to meet the goals of the children and youth. So we were really interested in what these children and youth had to say about their experiences from 2014 to 2017. So what we did was a series of interviews with the children and their families. And through narrative thematic analysis, we established a creative nonfiction or a short story that talks to their experience and really shares their story through the voice of a child. So if you're able to stop by my poster, you would have met Avery, and she shared her story through 2 diary entries that were taken during the middle of the IFP sessions. And if you didn't get a chance to come by my poster, please feel free to email me or follow us on Twitter. Thank you.
Coaches play a pivotal role in shaping the physical activity experiences of children and youth in the programs that they deliver. For example, the practices that they use can influence a child's skill development, their activity enjoyment, as well as their motivation to continue participating in physical activity. Therefore, the strategies used by coaches of children and youth must be carefully considered and evaluated. The Behavior Change Technique Taxonomy, which was developed by Susan Michi and colleagues, provides a comprehensive list of 93 behavior change techniques, which have been found to elicit meaningful changes in health-related behavior. So these behavior change techniques, or BCTs, can be conceptualized as the active ingredients of behavior change. So just like we wouldn't make an apple pie without apples and sugar, we can't elicit behavior change without BCTs. So the purpose of this project was to identify the active ingredients in an inclusive physical activity program for children and youth, which is called Igniting Fitness Possibilities, which Kristen already explained in detail. And we did so by going through the one-on-one coaching logs that the coaches fill out after each session and coding the presence and absence of these 93 different ingredients. So we looked for the different types and frequencies of BCTs used by the coaches. And we found that the BCTs, instruction on how to perform the behavior, behavioral practice and rehearsal and demonstration of the behavior, were the most frequently coded BCTs. And just like apple pie is often paired with vanilla ice cream, the taxonomy suggests that these 3 BCTs should be used in combination. So we've now updated our coach program to suggest that new skills be introduced using the steps teach, show, do. Thank you very much for listening, and if you'd like to learn more about the implications of this work, feel free to contact me.
What if we opened conversations with parents about their mental health? This is Sam Pizzola, who's the family leader on our team. And that's his child during a very fragile time in life where Sam reports that he hit a wall and he really wished that somebody in his healthcare team, his child's healthcare team, had asked him how he was doing. He wonders, what if we ask parents about their mental health? Our team's investigating this in 2 different ways. The first is to think about, should screening parents' mental health be considered in children's rehabilitation? We used a framework of 7 guiding questions to investigate this, looking at the level of evidence to support or not support screening, the availability of treatments, the availability of screeners, and whether or not parents would use those. We've also taken a deep dive using a systematic review to look specifically at the screening tools. We started with over 12,000 articles and winnowed down to 284 that identified 82 unique tools. We looked at the frequency and the purpose for using those measures to further refine the set that we will look at the psychometric properties and the clinical ratings for those tools. But why do all that work? Well, we go back to Sam's question, what if we asked parents about their mental health? Could we help to bridge the distance between child health services and adult health services, knowing that the health of children and their parents is interrelated? If we do, we have the potential to personalize pathways, lead and model social change, and connect the system. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Gupta, and I was a Ward Summer Student here at Bloorview in 2017, and I'm currently completing my 4th year of undergraduate at McMaster University. Participating in sports is something that children need, want, and love to do, but it comes with a risk of injury, including concussions. When a child sustains a concussion, they're hopefully taken to a medical professional who can diagnose and track their recovery to dictate when they're ready to return to play. When a child sustains a concussion, they may also experience motor and physical impairments, and it's critical to resolve these impairments prior to returning the child to play. But an inability to properly monitor and track these impairments may lead to premature return to play, and this puts a child at risk of further injury. And therefore, it's critical to have a concussion-specific tool for monitoring gross motor performance. So we created the Concussion Challenge Assessment, and this is based on Dr. Virginia Wright's Acquired Brain Injury Challenge Assessment. As with any concussion assessment, the test-retest reliability must be established to confirm the validity of the tool over a clinically relevant time frame. To do this, healthy participants come in at 2 time points to complete the Concussion Challenge Assessment, and the idea is to see similar results at both time points. So in this study, 67 participants came in to complete the Concussion Challenge Assessment, and the time points they came in at ranged from 15 days to 24 months apart. And the goal of the study was to dictate how time between assessments, sex, age, and change in height between the 2 assessments influence reliability of the tool. And it was found that 4 of the 6 tasks in the Concussion Challenge Assessment were reliable. However, this reliability was only true when reassessment occurred less than 1 year after the original assessment. The effects of both sex and age varied depending on the task. And finally, smaller changes in height mean that the task was more reliable. For more information, please contact myself or Dr. Nick Reid.
Hi, my name is Anne Marie Renzoni, and along with Tracy Shepard, we are presenting our project.
toward understanding the real-world effectiveness of augmentative and alternative communication in school activity settings. Tracy and I both work as clinical educators in augmentative communication at the Centralized Equipment Pool Program at Holland Bloorview. We had the privilege of working with Steve Ryan and Anna from research, and also we had team members from the school boards, the Toronto School Board, York Catholic, and Hamilton Wentworth School Boards. So based on the need to understand how students who use communication devices communicate during their school day and what factors can influence their success at school. So we developed a preliminary measure called the Functional Impact of Augmentative and Alternative Communication, an educator version. We'll call it the FIAC-E. This is an educator report questionnaire for students with complex communication needs between the ages of 3 and 18 years old. So in an earlier project, we developed the preliminary version of the FIAC-E, but we recognized we needed to do further development and testing of the measurement properties to have an outcome measure that's reliable and valid. So the aims of this project were to shorten the FIAC-E measure and to estimate its reliability and to obtain support for its validity.
So how we did this was our design was a two-part online survey that we surveyed educators who had recent experience with a student that used AAC in their classroom. The part one of the study was some demographic information about the educator themselves, and then more background information about one student that educator had been teaching over the last short term that had complex communication needs. Also a rating of that student's functional communication, face-to-face communication, and completion of the measure, the new measure. Part two, we invited them back 2 weeks later so that we can complete a reliability analysis. The good news is that we did find that this measure has some support as far as being a reliable educator report measure to look at real-world functioning of students who use AAC. We were able to reduce the items by 25%, and the measure met the criteria for reliability and validity measurement properties. So this is really a nice step towards being able to use the measure as a new, unique clinical educator measure, report measure that we can look at using for early clinical and educational and research applications. In addition, it will begin to help us understand some of the indicators that can help improve communication and learning and participation of kids in schools who are using communication systems. So thank you.
All right, my name is Megan, and I am a PhD student with Virginia Wright, and I'm presenting part of my thesis project. So balanced confidence is how certain someone is that they can maintain their balance in a specific setting or an activity. And while it has been shown to be an important predictor of physical activity in adults with physical disabilities, it has not been explored in youth with cerebral palsy. In response to this research gap, I conducted semi-structured interviews with youth with cerebral palsy in GMF-CS levels 1 to 3, as well as their parents. When faced with an activity that was perceived to be challenging to their balance, those in GMF-CS levels 1 and 2 reported avoiding these activities, especially when their peers were present. Conversely, those in level 3 tended to modify the activity, use assistive devices, or have help to complete these activities. These strategies seem to improve their balance confidence and actually facilitate participation. There we go. When asked how they felt when they lost their balance, those in GMF-CS level 3 reported that was just part of their daily life and they didn't feel like it was a big deal. Meanwhile, those in levels 1 and 2 maintained that they felt embarrassed when they lost their balance, particularly when it was in front of their peers. And in fact, it was this embarrassment that led them to avoid these activities. Finally, both groups reported that they were less likely to avoid an activity that was considered to be challenging to their balance if they preferred the activity, and preference seemed to be related to individual values and beliefs. Furthermore, a social environment provided by family, friends, coaches, teachers, and classmates also influenced their participation in activities considered to be challenging to their balance, in that a positive and supportive social environment seemed to enhance activity participation, while a negative social environment discouraged it. This information suggests that activity avoidance related to balance confidence may be more relevant to youth in GMFCS levels 1 and 2 than those in level 3, and that this activity avoidance might be overcome by providing supportive and encouraging environments and offering activities that are interesting and important to youth. If you'd like to learn more about this, feel free to contact me. Thanks.
Thank you so much to all of our Quick Hits presenters over the course of the day. Our final research talk today is led by Drs. Laura McAdam, clinician investigator and pediatrician, and Jenny Setchell, physiotherapist and research fellow. They will deliver a presentation titled "To Cheer or Not to Cheer in Childhood Rehabilitation. This is not the question."
Aha, thank you. So today we're going to talk about cheering, cheerfulness, cheering up in children's healthcare. Oh. But first, a huge thank you to the study participants and the research team, and as this is a collaborative study, there's a fair amount of overlap between the two. To give away the punchline before we start, our central argument is that there can be pitfalls to assuming that cheer is always beneficial. Cheer asterisk. It's an academic's joke, by the way. It means all things cheer. Cheer can be many things: laughter, solace, acclamation, a repetitive bringing together of two hands. It can be emotions, feelings. The body floods with happy hormones, a smile plays on a face. But it's more than just emotions, and certainly more than just so-called positive emotions. You can cheer for something without feeling good about it, for example. Attempts to cheer someone up might be intended to make them feel better, but the opposite might happen. Can you still hear me when this goes on and off? Is there anything I'm doing? Go that way. I'm trying to be in the middle for these people. Okay, I'll try that. It does sound better, doesn't it? Okay. Sorry, those people. What happens when certain things are cheered for regularly in children's rehab? What's missed out on when cheerfulness dominates a clinical environment? In exploring these types of questions, our research examined two main things. The first is that it's fairly simple to highlight. We're just going to mention that today. Although wonderfully helpful at times, when clinicians are only cheerful, this tends to miss out on moments when we need to acknowledge, validate, or support people through so-called negative emotions. Things like sadness, anger, fear, grief, for example. So we worked quite a lot in this project, attending to moments when we as clinicians are keen to give good news, but when perhaps it's more important to sit with something more difficult. The second cheer thing is a little trickier, and it's our focus for today. We consider what clinicians cheer for, and that our cheering tends to promote so-called normality or success in fairly narrow ways. We draw this discussion from a 3-year project we and others conducted at outpatient neuromuscular clinics across 2 Canadian children's hospitals, including this one here. We observed the roughly 3 times a year clinic visits of over 40 young people with muscular dystrophy, mostly Duchenne muscular dystrophy, or DMD for short, and their families. So for those who don't know, DMD is a muscle condition that mainly affects boys and men. The muscle strength throughout the body decreases over time, including for the heart and the breathing muscles. Most people with DMD are using power wheelchairs by their teens and mechanical breathing support by their 20s. So lifespan is often limited to 20s or 30s, although some people do live longer. Sorry about that. As problems with breathing are often a cause of decline, death, regular assessment of breathing function are a standard part of clinic visit. And we're going to focus on some of this testing today. One test involves blowing into the spirometer, to the mouthpiece of a spirometer machine. The amount of force produced by blowing is tracked by the progression of a cartoon chicken across a screen. Nina, a respiratory therapist, asked 8-year-old Hayden, "Do you want to practice or for real?" And Hayden responded, "For real." And they did the test and it looked like the chicken got to the flag. Nina cheered him as he did the test and congratulated him for doing a great job. She then asked, "Do you think you can go past the flag?" pointing to the flag on the screen. Hayden excitedly said, yes, I can go past it, all the way to the numbers." And Nina responded with "Oh, wow." And they began the test again with Nina cheering him on again. Once he was done, Nina thanked him for doing a great job. Next, using a different machine that measures cough strength, Nina encouraged Hayden to cough in order to clear his lungs. Hayden tried his first cough, but he didn't seem that into it. But after Hayden asked, "How good was that?" And Nina said, "It was 205. Hayden immediately said, "I'll do better." And they tried again, and Nina looked at the device and said, 255, give me 5. And Hayden gave her a high five and said, "Yeah." He said, "One more time, I'll get to 599. Nina looked at Hayden and said with a surprise, "That's a good number." The therapist's proclamation and positivity, or cheering, solidified that this high-scoring type of breathing or coughing mattered, one that approximated so-called normality. The respiratory therapist interacting with the machine cheered for Hayden's normality. This affected Hayden. He was visibly excited by the numbers or the chicken's progress. Now, it's important to note here that the clinician is not intending to cheer for normality. She's cheering for effort. She needs maximal effort from Hayden in order to get useful results. And Laura will go into the intentions of the clinicians a bit more in a minute. The cheering for normality is an unintended effect. And it's these unintended effects we want to highlight today. In our study, we found that when the breathing or the movement of the ankle or the way that a child walks or his engagement in social activities or the amount she can lift her arms approximated normal, or at least when it didn't worsen, we found this usually provoked positive words or cheering from the clinician. The cheer brought attention to the various measuring devices, the respiratory machines, the time tests for walks, the questions to test social function, which made the normally breathing, moving, looking, functioning child matter, brought to the fore and given a positive valence by the cheer. High five. When the body became so-called abnormal, however, families were not prepared for it. Or they may have been, but the cheer worked against this. They'd been busy cheering for normality. A year later, we observed Hayden again. He'd turned 9, and as expected with DMD, his breathing was getting weaker and he was noticeably more tired during the testing. Another respiratory therapist, Karen, was cheering less. Karen asked if they could keep going. Hayden shook his head. Karen looked at him curiously and said, "No? How about just 1? Hayden paused and then nodded. After each try, Karen asked Hayden if it was okay and if he could do it again. Each time, Hayden nodded, and after each attempt would lean in to view the number. Hayden had learned from all the earlier cheer that the numbers matter. Without being prompted, he was checking them. Cheer had brought attention to the breadth, strength, the screen, and the numbers they produce. So here we encounter the problem that we found, that our cheering for high scores or strong muscles or normal walking, etc., while it might feel good for the child at the time, it sets up a problem when someone gets worse. Normality cheered for sets up a so-called abnormality that is seen as not so good. And this is definitely not just an issue in the 2 study clinics that we observed, but one inherent to rehabilitation. Striving for so-called normality is part of its core business. A problematic highlighted by BRI senior scientist and our co-researcher who's in the audience, Professor Barb Gibson. Rehabilitation focuses on assisting people to achieve or approximate normal function, normal behaviours, normal movement patterns, normal activities and normal roles. While these practices can have positive effects, the impulse towards normalisation also contributes to sustaining negative attitudes towards disabled people and disavows the richness of human diversity. Put simply, when we try to get people better, are we inferring that getting worse is bad? Thanks for your patience, everyone. What the cheer excluded was difference, or Gibson's richness of human diversity. In our study, normal breathing cheered for, inadvertently of course, creates an abnormal breathing, such as fatigue or use of a ventilator, that will not be cheered. How might cheering be reconfigured in childhood rehab? Can we reconfigure so that diverse bodies and lives can be seen as something not negative or bad, but as a usual and expected part of the world, or perhaps even something to celebrate? It's going to be longer than 1 minute because of all the messing around. I'm very sorry. About 5.
Good. Great job. Good stuff. Excellent. That was great. So I found it particularly striking, reflecting on how often I was using these words when I was examining a patient. These are the actual words I used. It was a little embarrassing when I read through all of the recordings from this study. It really made me question, what are we cheering for in clinic? What is our goal of cheering? What words or phrases can I use and can the team use to avoid these pitfalls of cheering that Jenny's already highlighted for us? So I definitely do not have all of the answers for this, but I have reflected together with the team to really come up with a different strategy of how we're interacting with our patients in clinic. So, why are we cheering in clinic? We had a long discussion with the different team members, and really what we came down to is our intention is to try and get the best performance because the results impact our clinical decision making. Do I adjust the dose of corticosteroids? Do we start talking about a wheelchair at this time? Do we need to ask, do we need to discuss, is this the time for a sleep study? Because we actually think you might need extra support at night when you're breathing. We also feel that it was part of human nature. We are all conditioned to respond to someone. You ask somebody to do something, you generally get a response back. And so when we were thinking about this, we couldn't remember anything in our textbooks teaching us to do this, but it's really our social and human interactions that are guiding how we're responding in clinic. So, what are our intentions? We're really talking about motivation, we're talking about coaching, we're talking about encouragement, we're talking about praise. These are different adjectives that as a team we came up with when we're thinking about what it is that we're doing in clinic. Now, I want to draw your attention to a study that was done in the United States. And this is a study for a specific physical therapy test. It's called the 6-minute walk test. Now, there are many different versions of this, but in Duchenne, you have 2 pylons set up 25 meters apart, and you have to walk around this for 6 minutes. And you're given scripted coaching words that you should be using to try and encourage the individual to keep on walking for those 6 minutes. However, in this study, what the researchers did is they asked the youth to walk between these pylons, but they offered one of these times $50. Okay, this was a real extreme version of motivation, and it was most certainly an external motivation. And it's not so surprising that they saw that the youth walked further when they were given the $50. But I think it really highlights to us, what is it that we're doing in clinic? We want best performance, but we have to reflect on what words we're using to try and avoid some of those pitfalls, but also have a good understanding of how they're doing physically. And so as we're reflecting as a team, we were wondering, what other research can we draw upon when we're looking at rewording what we're saying? And so one of our thoughts was parenting. Now, we know we are not parenting, but there is a lot of research in this area looking at how we can word things to help with encouragement. Now, some of the parenting words that you'll see are good, great, better, best. These are kind of the same words that I was using. So when we're looking at other constructs or other ways of thinking about what we're saying, we need to be considering, is the praise sincere and is it honest? If it isn't how the individual identifies they're doing, perhaps they're feeling we're being dishonest with them. Is it specific? Is it descriptive? Are we praising their effort in their process, not the ability? And also, should we be flexible? Is this test really needed today? These are some of the phrases that we came up with as a team to start us on our journey of how to rework things when we really were considering the pitfalls of cheer. So I can see you're not up for testing today. Let's take a break and revisit it next visit. It's okay to do this. You also made a safe choice using the stairs to help you stand up. Or you had great focus on that test. There's so many different variations on this, but I think we really need to be thoughtful around the words that we are using.
So in no way do we want to suggest that cheer should be eliminated from the world or from healthcare. Cheer is not inherently normalising nor inherently problematic. However, our intent was to question a taken for granted assumption in rehab. This calls for a rethink of childhood healthcare towards a consideration of all sorts of bodies and lives as part of the usual, variable and rich nature of the world. Avoiding the pitfalls of cheer can help to open up multiple other possibilities in doing rehab care. This openness does not make existing approaches to healthcare unusable, but rather it challenges it destabilises their certainty or moral right, and by challenging their underlying assumptions. Clinicians might consider dropping cheer at times. They might cheer for other things, or perhaps even add new words to their existing cheer. Always returning back to find ways to live and even die well, and acknowledging that can mean many different things.
So Jenny and I would like to leave you with this challenge. We know that everybody in this room here has different roles, both inside of Holland Bloorview and outside of Holland Bloorview. So we would challenge you that the next time you find yourself cheering, you need to consider what is your goal of cheering and what are the potential pitfalls. We think that this will make it overall a better experience for everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura and Jenny. So that concludes the formal agenda of our symposium. It's been an incredible day. I just wanted to close with a couple of short closing remarks. The theme of the day was global impact, and certainly for me, I think it's become clear that one path to global impact is through enabling local participation. We heard from Christine Imms this morning about participating being living, and the good life as being one that is participatory, and the importance of learning in real-world, ecologically relevant contexts. And I think we saw many examples of that throughout the day with Jess Bryan's early intervention in the home, and being a real-world context, and the parent coaching. We also saw an example of this through Luca's amazing dance, participating in his own very unique way. Emily's real-world resilience, leading to her lived experience. And then I think we also saw examples of today where advances in knowledge of body functions and structures leads to expanded personalized participation. One example being Darcy's team's findings in de novo changes in the genome, and that opening the door to personalized medicine. Earlier in the morning, we also saw the groundbreaking work of Yash, bridging neuroimaging and neurobiology. So I wanted to close with one quote, which I think brings a lot of the themes together today, and this is from Bertrand Russell, a British philosopher. And he said that the good life is one inspired by love and guided by knowledge. And I think that's a really potent combination, love and knowledge. Love, in our context, maybe being the lived experience, and knowledge being the knowledge that we all bring to the table, being a pathway to global impact. So I'd like to thank my co-host, Beth. Thank you for your leadership, and not only today, but every day that you advise, research, and support the work of the hospital Research Institute. We're lucky to have such an incredible partner who is passionate about families being engaged in all aspects of research. And my note says, give gift. Shortly, we will have the Honorable Minister Raymond Cho open the awards ceremony in the atrium. We ask that all of you join us there. We're a little bit behind schedule, but we'll give folks a few minutes to make their way over there. We're also very pleased to have Ron Adia, a talented young man with autism, who will be playing the piano for us during the ceremony. So thank you all, and we'll see you again next year.